Draymond really is one of the more unique cases in history in terms of his skill set. Number one, like would he was just witness to a paradigm shift, like we talked about in the league, driven by a player, driven by a couple players really, and then driven by a coach that came in and an offensive sort of overhaul that we've both talked about here and there, just about the way the Warriors decided to play. Yeah, I mean, like Draymond, who knows if his career had continued on the arc that it was on if he had not been with the players that he was with or in the situation that he was with. Now, how much of a shift, how much credit does he have coming his way for seeing the shift coming and recognizing how he needed to adjust his game? I think that's something else that needs to factor in too. Yeah, go ahead.
Like my take on that personally, or just in general, because I think he deserves.
I'm here for your take. Yeah,
man, I think he deserves a ton of credit. Because he's a 4-year player at Michigan State. He's a really good college player. And I think his best skill as a college player was probably kind of his passing and floor tempo direction decision making. That's what stood out to me as he got, I think as a freshman he didn't play that much, but as an upperclassman, on those Izzo teams, that's what stood out to me. And then to see him and hear him talk about it and to go back and study it, to see him come in and basically just understand, like, okay, I got to get in better shape. I gotta play differently. I go back to your no waste idea on offense. I got to focus on these things with the guys around me because I am a good passer. I am a good decision maker. I play in that old school Bill Russell style of like just whatever the heck it takes to win. Who cares about stats? And then the huge thing, of course, for him was he's talked about this. I have it in my video from earlier this season where he recognized pretty quickly if he wanted to get on the floor and stay on the floor, he needed to be a dominant team defender. He needed to use his length of his arms and the quickness of his feet and his body frame and the combination of those two things to excel defensively. And I think about this stuff when we don't have to rehash it, but like when people were saying Zion is the next Draymond or everyone is the next Draymond, the big thing I actually look at is how I think they're able to read the game. And he was a really good passer and decision maker on offense at Michigan State. So that's not like a one-sided, he can only be the offensive coordinator thing, right? I think that translates to defense. So I give him a ton of credit. But what do you think?
I agree. I mean, there's if you're talking about shifts that are interesting. I mean, the fact that he was witness to this, I guess there have been like remnants of it. If you don't have like a dominant downhill orchestrator, like we'll say a Luka, well, just somebody who is such a dominant scorer that the entire defense can be looking at them. And you can say, here it comes, and they still can't do anything about it. Not every team's going to have the opportunity to do that. I'm thinking back about like offenses in the past that would be, you have a pretty good like medium post score, low post score, and then the movement of your smaller players happens when the ball is in the big's hand. I mean, I know we saw that with like Utah. Kerr even talked about that, how annoying it was to defend, and then the Warriors just take that and ramp it up to 14. On a scale of 1 to 10, that is. And Draymond was there. I guess I'm trying to just dial in how much credit or how much of a pioneer he was, because we have seen a movement going back to talking about like these elbow creator guys, these like connective playmaker types, the Sabonises, the Draymonds, the Bam Adebayos. It's not a new thing, really, right? I mean, there's some version of that has always existed in terms of like going to the high post and having off-ball movement. You're the historical expert here. I mean, where are the earliest versions of that? Because you even talked about like weaponizing ball movement. Didn't really. I mean, we saw it earlier with Rick Barry. That lineage, I'm just trying to dial in here. How it's not radically new, even though it seems like it was compared to the basketball that we saw from, like you were talking about, from the 70s up to like 2005.
Yeah. Well, we have to be careful, though, to make the distinction between the individual guy who's kind of the Ray Allen, running around, catch and shoot, versus movement concepts and X's and O's in offense. Because what cracks me up is a lot of the stuff that goes out of vogue and then comes back in vogue in today's game are really old sets. You know, you see, I think of the Princeton offense sometimes. I think that's one of the most fascinating offenses to study from an X's and O's standpoint, because no one really runs the Princeton offense, but like a ton of concepts from the Princeton offense are run everywhere at every level because they're really effective. And this is like, what is it, 2022? I mean, we're talking 60 years old at minimum. We're talking about this stuff. And there's like, you know, videos of Pete Carrill talking about it till he's blue in the face. But Tex Winter with the triangle offense. These are really old ideas. And when I think of the Warriors and movement and elbow situations and like waiting for 2 or 3 men to come off each other, I mean, in the 60s, a ton of teams ran these split cuts, man. The 60s and the 70s, you had Bill Walton, high post elbow offense with like other guys running around trying to get open. And these were really popular offenses. They just didn't have a 3-point shot. Mm-hmm. And so as the 80s came along and expansion and economics and all this stuff changed, you started to get the early signs of heliocentrism. You started to get different, you know, you had more low post stuff. You had these Grant Hill, Vince Carter come in the league, Allen Iverson, ball handling opens up, and you focus more on those individual perimeter players as offensive superstars. But I think a lot of the stuff we're seeing today is just going back to like the 60s and 70s when they had things figured out about movement. And the crazy,
it's hilarious. It's hilarious how I always think about it. It's like there are only so many notes in the scales.
Right.
There are only so many combinations. I had one of my roommates in college was a jazz major, and he was just like, there are only so many notes. That's what he was saying. It's like there are only so many combinations, and then past that, it becomes about the people playing them. Like that's where the texture comes from. Like the core ideas, they're limited. There are only so many ways to put words together.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full episode of This Thinking Basketball podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts.